The following is a production of the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network.
Well, it has been a minute since we have been on the air for one of these episodes. Just a little while ago, we were talking about the draft, and now we are talking about the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. My name is Dean Millard, and as always, pleased to be joined by UFHL insider and a man who has put in a lot of work this summer, along with Commissioner Andrea Karandek and Nathan Bender, to make sure that hockey runs smoothly. Larry Fisher, this is weird. I am sweating buckets talking about the World Juniors right now. Usually I would have a toque on, which is a knit cap with a pom-pom for our American friends. But usually we would be in the middle of winter talking about the World Juniors. What's going on?
Yeah, Dean, it's sweltering here in Kelowna as well, and it is crazy to be World Juniors in summer. I mean, we always have the Hlinka Gretzky Cup in August, which is sort of a fun kickstart to the draft-eligible draft year, but so strange having the World Juniors in the middle of summer. And, I mean, ticket sales have been relatively slow for Hockey Canada in Edmonton, and, I mean, take a look out the window and there's a lot of people still at the lake, a lot of people enjoying, back to school a few weeks away, getting in that last bit of summer. But for us hardcores, Dean, there's nothing we'd rather be doing than watching hockey starting tomorrow night. I mean, the World Juniors puck drops tomorrow night. Right now, as we speak, Canada-Sweden, the only tune-up game, pre-tournament game for Canada, is starting as well today. So, definitely excited for Ultimate Fantasy World Junior, and there's no place I'd rather be than talking hockey, even on a hot summer day in August.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be, I always felt like when I was growing up and you played summer hockey, it was so weird going to the rink in shorts and coming out in shorts, but I'm going to be going to games in shorts in the nice, cool Rogers place. There's a nice new ice house down there, so if it gets too hot, you can relax. So it will be quite interesting. Of course, we are live on Twitch, on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Twitch channel, so please chime in on the message boards. Some great chatting so far. Hey, guys, so happy to see you guys. Looking good. They're talking about you, Larry. Great stuff, boys. Boys, not toys, says. But, noise. We want to avoid the Noid if we're talking about pizza. I know Andy's big with Domino's, so definitely we'll want to avoid the Noid when it comes to drafting. And we're going to get into everything about the redraft and what happened, but some teams were simply at the mercy of, first of all, COVID, then politics, and then players wanting to be or not wanting to be there. So this 2.0 UFWJ is, there's a ton of luck that was involved going into the draft and for some countries during the draft.
Yeah, Dean, 91 players turned over, actually, I guess it'll be 96 when you add in the 5 from, we're still not done, Dean. We got supplementary draft 3.0 with a handful of picks left to go once Switzerland finalizes their roster for prior to start of the games tomorrow. But when you look at it that way, 96 out of 300, 10 countries, 30-man roster, counting a 5-man protected list, 25-man active roster, so 250 active players. Every single player in the World Juniors will have value in UFWJ, plus a 5-man protected list for future tournaments, future World Junior Championships. But you look at that, 300 total players were drafted, and 96 of them, almost 1 in 3, that were going to be rostered in December aren't back for August. So quite a bit of turnover, and as mentioned, Dean, completely out of the country's control. But the way we did supplementary draft 2.0, we called it, the way that worked was you replaced the players in the rounds you lost them. So if you lost your first round pick, you got to make a first round pick. If you didn't, if your first round pick's coming back, then obviously you pass in the first round and you started drafting if you lost the guy in the second or third round. So the parity between the 10 countries on paper, Dean, still looks fairly comparable, but the overall roster strength top to bottom, when we get into the grades, you'll see most countries dropped a little bit in their grade just simply because the talent level isn't quite what it would have been in December.
And when I mentioned about, getting some luck, that happened. One country improved in the post rankings, and we'll talk about it later when we get into it, but Ian Constable and I were, him and I don't have a lot of hair between us, but what we had, we were pulling it out of our beards thinking, how do we get back in to this draft to get one of these guys that we'll talk about later that kept dropping, and we couldn't believe it. So it was really interesting to watch that. And as mentioned, some franchises, countries affected way more than others. It's unfortunate. This is an interesting tournament because it was postponed, and now we had a redraft. So I kind of look at it as, we still want to win, but it's a really interesting tune-up. That you're kind of going into it saying some countries are at the mercy. We weren't negatively affected as others, but we're looking at this saying this is a really good opportunity for us to, if we can win, bank some money, and then start working towards the next year. While there's some countries already that must be saying we're already looking to December.
And it's such a quick turnaround here, Dean, because, come August 16th, just 8 days from today's the trade deadline already, right? There's not a lot of time here for trades to happen because the tournament starts on the 9th and the prelim or the medal round starts on the 17th, which is the trade deadline's on the 16th, the off day between the preliminary round and the medal round. But you're right. I think a lot of countries, this is a bit of a feeling out process just to see how this whole it's never been done before. This is such an innovative concept, dynasty league for the World Juniors, and especially because this is trending to be, while it is based on rosters, a much younger World Juniors than usual. Normally, all these 19-year-olds that are now 20-year-olds by August would be taking up the majority of the roster spots. It's usually a 19-year-old tournament, which, if that was the case, they'd mostly be 20-year-olds now in the summer. But a lot of them, you don't want to necessarily say they've outgrown the World Juniors, but some of them have already played in the NHL now down the stretch and stuff. And they're gearing up for an NHL training camp just a month away. And some are recovering from off-season surgeries, which hockey players always go through at all ages, trying to get ready and gear up for that training camp starting September 15th. So just naturally, with all the turnover, there's going to be more returnees come December than usual. And I think a lot of countries, like you said, are therefore treating this as a tune-up for December, knowing they're going to have a solid core coming back, and they'll know come that December annual draft what holes they really want to fill.
All right, let's take a quick look at the scoring system, which hasn't changed. But I'm going to say this because I know there's a lot of UFHL people watching. You will notice there's no penalty minutes. And in the World Juniors, it's really easy to rack up penalty minutes with 10-minute misconducts for hits to the head. And that was something that, all the country owners and GMs and everybody and the admin staff was great about working around that time on ice. Now, this is obviously a new tournament. As you said, nobody's done this. It's done by hand and spreadsheets, so we can't rely on fan tracks. But I just love the fact that we have time on ice. I know we're looking at it with some people in the UFHL. It'd be great to get shorthanded time on ice, but I know Fantrax, I think, only does time on ice. I'm not sure. But let's run through the scoring system, and those are kind of the unique changes from the UFHL that we normally see with a lot of our people. And for anybody new that can follow along and with the World Juniors to see our scoring system. So maybe you can run through some of the highlights for you, Larry.
I think you hit the two biggest ones there, Dean. Penalty minutes is always a contentious issue. I know there's a lot of people that don't like the 10-minute misconducts, even in the UFHL, and how can you phase those out? So a 10-minute misconduct at the end of the game in a 5-1 loss doesn't get you the same amount of fantasy points as the first star that night who had a hat trick or whatever the case. So we decided, like you said, because of the checking to the head 2 and 10 being a prevalent call at the World Juniors, we tried to preempt that or get ahead of it and remove penalty minutes as a category and instead replace it with time on ice, which even from the December tournament, Dean, and again, we'll take a look at that in a bit, but we only got 3-day sample size, but time on ice was a real factor there because every single player, that ensures that every single player has value. So if you know who's going to be on Latvia's first line or top penalty kill unit or whatever the case, which defenseman's going to be out there killing penalties for Latvia, that guy's going to be racking up points from time on ice, as you see there, only at 0.05 per minute, but it is a contributing factor. The goaltending, Dean, is different than the UFHL as well. That is to account for the inevitable blowouts in the World Juniors. And again, you take Russia out of the equation, and I don't want to say it waters down the tournament, but there's going to be some blowouts, no doubt, in this preliminary round. You really have the big four. I would include Slovakia, but a lot of the top Slovaks, or the top three Slovaks, Slavkowski, Simon Nemec, and Philip Mazar, all the first-round picks, are skipping this tournament to get ready for NHL training camps. So without Slovakia having their big three, you really are left with the big four. Everybody expects it's going to be Sweden and USA in one pool and Canada and Finland in the other pool as sort of the final four. It'd be surprising if there was an upset. So when you look at the goaltenders in the scoring system, obviously it's going to favor those goaltenders, but we've made it so that we've kind of tried to even that out. So if you have, I ran the numbers last night, Dean, and if you had a goaltender who had a 40 save loss and allowed 4 goals, so 4 goals against in a 40 save loss, that would give you the same fantasy points as a 20 save win. So a 20 save win with 2 goals against, and so the team wins 4-2. And the shots are 40-20. The goaltenders would both get 7 fantasy points is the way that works. So it should mitigate the blowouts. Obviously, if there's a shutout in there, that's going to pump up those the big 4 goaltenders. But generally speaking, we tweaked the scoring system for goaltenders from the UFHL because there aren't that many blowouts in the NHL. In the World Juniors, we're expecting some blowouts in the preliminary round. So goaltending is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Goalies that face a lot of shots and maybe are from those weaker countries, if they have a big game, and we've seen big games in the World Juniors, Dean, 50-plus saves where they keep it to a 3-1 game or something, there's a good chance that goalie with 50-plus saves and a 3-1 loss, they're going to be the player of the game for their country at the World Juniors, but they might come out ahead. All things considered, they might end up with more fantasy points from that game than the goaltender that won 3-1 but only had 9 shots or whatever the case. So goaltending is going to be an interesting study. And again, looking forward to December. Will there be changes proposed? But certainly on the skater side, very similar to UFHL, with the exception of no penalty minutes. And obviously time on ice is going to be a big factor here in the UFWJ. And again, a lot of UFHL franchises, Dean, are watching the UFWJ this summer. If they're not outside enjoying the lake or enjoying the campground, hopefully they're watching the UFWJ. And if they are, they're going to be paying attention to time on ice and how they might be able to implement it in the UFHL with their off-season meetings starting right after this tournament, August 27th and 28th, the following weekend after UFWJ wraps up. UFHL owners meetings, and on that first agenda is going to be time on ice as well as any other scoring category, scoring system potential proposals. So very interesting when you look at the scoring system and how it could apply also to the UFHL going forward.
Yeah, we just saw the Holinka, and we always see at the World Juniors there are some lopsided games.
It's a rout. It's a blowout.
There's blowouts all the time. It's inevitable in this tournament. So we're going to see a lot of that, and I think that's it also reveals some strategy that some countries may have used when you're looking at a top goalie versus a goalie who's going to face a lot of shots, and we'll get into all of that as we go as well. But you alluded to it. Let's take a look at those standings from 3 days of gameplay that we had, and it was really starting to get interesting, especially for our country. But 3 days of that tournament, it's really hard to look at these standings and say, oh, this is how the rest of the August tournament is going to turn around run out, because things have flipped on their head.
Yeah, and exactly like the World Junior Championship in the real world, we're wiping the slate clean, starting from scratch. Everybody starts at 0. So these points are a good thing to look back on, but they're going to be thrown out the window when the puck drops tomorrow morning. But it was a small sample size, 3 days out of the 12-day tournament. But I think it was a huge hit, Dean. Everybody loved it. As we should point out, it's a total points tournament from start to finish for the inaugural UFWJ for this year's rendition. So from day one to the gold medal game, it's total points all the way through. Something else we should note, Dean, is because Russia's been and Belarus have been kicked out of the tournament or they're not welcome in December, there is no relegation this summer. So the lower seeded countries, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but let's just say Austria, Latvia, Germany, Switzerland, assuming those are the ones that are, or 2 out of those 4 are going to be playing for, normally would be playing a best of 3 relegation. They wouldn't be making the quarterfinals. Well, this time they're just not going to be playing. It'll be the top 8 go into the quarterfinals. There is no relegation. So if you drafted players from those countries, you're gonna miss out on some fantasy points. But looking back on the scoring from December, again, small sample size, 3 days, but Scoreway, very cool name, obviously playing off of the Score coin and SCO. But Scoreway got off to a really hot start. There's your guys, East End right there in a silver medal position, eyeing up gold. And then look at the battle that would have been playing out early on for bronze. Anarchia, Can West, and Elite Prospectia, all separated by 1 point. But again, it was changing from day to day. And again, time on ice, such a factor. And of course, in these preliminary round, not every country plays every day. So when you're looking at those standings, if I remember right, I think Sweden had 2 games there. So the teams that had Swedish players had an extra game. Canada had only played 1 game. So every day there's big swings because different countries play on different days throughout the preliminary round. Not every country plays every day. So, but yeah, looking back, it was a lot of fun for 3 days. I think it was gaining a lot of momentum. Again, it's maybe a little harder to sell in the middle of August, but I sure hope everybody tunes in and to the actual World Juniors and certainly to UFWJ, because I think this is something so unique and so innovative, a dynasty league for the World Juniors. I think it's going to be a huge hit. And like you said, Dean, this summer's all about, kind of working out the kinks and deciding how we want to do things come December, when maybe there will be relegation and maybe we will have, play the preliminary round, and then we'll do a redraft going into the quarterfinals and do it more like UFHL does for the playoffs with the leasing system and stuff. But right now it's from the start of the tournament tomorrow all the way to the gold medal game on August 20th. Not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday, all the way through total points. So if you have players that make it to those medal games, you're going to get obviously extra man games played with something like time on ice, Dean. You know how important that's going to be. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun regardless. And then we'll reevaluate after the tournament to set the stage for December, the first kind of official real tournament from where all the players will be available.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see this evolve, because it was an absolute blast. I mean, the World Juniors is always fun. I was, had the fortunate chance to be at home in December and watching with my dad, and he was getting into it, asking if a guy scored, was he on East End and things like that. So just gave a different meaning to it. And, we love everybody to chime in with us on the message boards here on our Twitch channel. Please do that. Ultimate Fantasy Sports. How big is this tournament for Brad Lambert? Let's start there before we get into some of the overall rosters and some of your grades. And if anybody does have some questions, please chime in. If you were involved in the December, what it was like for you. Are you as amped up now? But why don't you take that Brad Lambert question?
Yeah, great question. Talk about a Winnipeg Jets prospect. You always love when we can pump one of those guys up. But Brad Lambert, small sample size in December. Finland was one of the countries that had played 2 games. Through those 2 games, Brad Lambert was a driver. His line was Finland's best line, and they're all 3 are back for this summer tournament. Him and big Samuel Helenius and Kalle Vasanen. So I expect that line to be good again for Finland. They got a strong team. Atu Räty obviously missed the December tournament. He would have been their go-to guy. He had a positive COVID test and was held out of traveling to Canada. So that adds another element with Räty coming back. But really, I think you look at Räty and Lambert, they're 2 guys that fell in their respective draft classes from, potentially being in the conversation for first overall. Lambert goes at the end of the first round with Winnipeg's second pick, and Räty obviously fell into the second round the year before. So both these guys are going to be awfully motivated. And I think Brad Lambert, he really wants to pick up where he left off in December, because he had good chemistry and he had a lot of jump in that tournament because he had such a slow start to his draft year in Finland. And I think he had a chip on his shoulder. He was out to prove something, and so far so good through 2 games. Let's hit the reset button and let's see how Brad Lambert comes out. But how big of a tournament it is for him, if this was a tournament prior to the draft, it would be even bigger. Now he's been drafted. He knows he's going to Winnipeg's training camp in a month. But I think, again, it's still a showcase for guys like him. Shane Wright won't be here in the summer, but guys like that have something to prove, that feel like they were slighted at the draft and they're better than some of the guys that went ahead of them. Well, Brad Lambert is going to be playing against the number of guys that went ahead of him just a month ago or a few weeks ago in the NHL draft. Now he's on the same ice as them. He can show those teams, start showing those teams already, hey, look, you passed on me and I'm skating circles around that guy you took. So I think from a motivation standpoint, this is a big tournament for Brad Lambert, and obviously the Winnipeg Jets hope that he looks as good as he did at the December tournament.
It's so interesting to, see the guys that are there compared to the guys that aren't, that decided to pass for whatever reason, whether, Dylan Guenther's, obviously he's recovering from an injury. He's getting ready for the season and things like that. But, for different, I remember, this is going way back. Remember when Ray Bourque said no to Canada at a Canada Cup and everybody freaked out? It was like, how could you say no to Canada? But this is a different story. Like, this isn't these guys saying no in December when they've already played half a season. This is, for some guys, totally disrupting their training. And if they're coming back from an injury, I don't blame them for not going to this tournament.
And I think that's going to be interesting too, Dean, because some of these European kids especially, their leagues are already starting. You can go watch KHL highlights if you want right now. And some of these junior leagues in other countries, they've been in camp with their club teams already and stuff. And there have been some pre-tournament games leading up to this tournament. But European hockey schedule is always a month ahead. So a lot of the North American guys, I know here in Kelowna, so many NHL players, this week is their first week back on the ice, gearing up towards training camp on September 15th. They basically take all of July, and again, a lot of them miss the playoffs, so they're off, a few months, but most guys don't touch the ice in July, including junior players, and then they really ramp up in August. Well, this year, it's been, like I said, it's a big disruption to your entire off season to have to stay on the ice and try to gear up for this. But I think the European teams, and again, I highlight Finland and Sweden, might be a little bit ahead just because they've been training all along, where the Canadians and Americans, not as much, but there's a lot of talent across all the teams, and it is a disruption. And I think like I said, Dean, I don't want to say certain. When we get looking at the missing impact players, I think you'll really see who's not here, and you'll see that when you see the names, some of them have, as I said, again, somewhat outgrown the World Juniors. They are pro hockey players now. They are likely going to be in the Calder conversation next season. They're penciled into a roster spot come training camp at September 15th for their NHL team. They don't want to risk coming here and getting banged up, getting hurt, and nor does their NHL team. Their NHL team, with the flat salary cap, are only going up $1 million on the ceiling. A lot of NHL teams are going to be relying on young, talented, entry-level contract guys coming in at a cheap cap hit and making an impact. So they don't necessarily want to loan them to this tournament with the potential of injury either.
I just pray that no Philadelphia Flyer gets hurt at this summer tournament, or else Ed Schneider will, the Schneider family, the ghost of Ed. Like, remember the Philadelphia Flyers? They freaked out, and was it the Islanders too? I think when Tavares got hurt one time. I mean, NHL teams cannot be liking this. Like, they cannot be happy. Some of the guys wanted to go play, and other guys, probably the team leaned on them. Like, if I was an NHL team, like if for the Winnipeg Jets, you got one guy playing in the tournament and one guy not. And I guess it goes to how close they are to making the actual team. If, knock on wood, I don't want anybody to get hurt, but if Brad Lambert was to get hurt, it doesn't impact the Winnipeg Jets roster this year as much as if Cole Perfetti gets hurt.
And Cole Perfetti, again, I believe he had knee surgery in February, March, towards the end of the season. So he's still recovering, trying to get that strength back to make an impact and be a regular in that top 9 for the Jets this year. And when you look at that Jets depth chart, I would say Cole Perfetti's penciled in there, like you said, whereas Brad Lambert, they're thinking at least one more year of development. Maybe he can challenge for a spot next year. So likely we see Brad Lambert not only at this tournament, Dean, but likely we see him again at December. So with a fairly quick turnaround. So a lot of these guys are going to have two showcases in a row for further NHL teams, but just to see how they stack up best on best amongst their peers. So really looking forward to that. But yeah, definitely a lot of NHL teams. You mentioned the Flyers. A bit of a surprise they let Tyson Forster play in this tournament, because he's another guy coming off injury. And I know he did come back to the OHL at the end of the season, but a guy that was banged up last year that I thought they would want to be fully healthy as becoming a first-year pro. He's going to play pro either AHL or NHL this coming season. I'm pretty sure of it. And then another one, Dean, the biggest surprise for me is Mason McTavish, the Anaheim Ducks. And again, Anaheim maybe not thinking they're going to be a Stanley Cup contender. Any experience is good experience. But Mason McTavish played a lot of hockey this last year. I think they said he played in 5 different leagues plus showcases. Obviously was in the Memorial Cup, had a huge impact in Hamilton winning the Memorial Cup and the hat trick in that tournament. So he barely had an offseason. He might have been lucky to get a couple of weeks off and he's right back at it. But that's a guy that just went to his team. I think Kent Johnson from East End did the same thing. Those guys played at the Olympics. They played at the Worlds, men's Worlds, and then they went back to their teams and said, hey, I love playing hockey. There's nothing. I don't want to be at the lake in August. I want to be in a cold rink in Edmonton trying to put the puck in the net. So good on guys like Mason McTavish and Kent Johnson. Wanting to wear the Maple Leaf, wanting to win World Junior Gold, and certainly their Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors, their UFWJ countries appreciate having them back for this summer showcase.
Yeah, well, we certainly are happy that Kent Johnson is playing in this tournament because honestly, I'm really surprised. Well, first of all, you and I talked about this. Let's not ignore the giant elephant in the room. The investigations that are going on in Hockey Canada. Rightfully so. These need to be dealt with, and the perpetrators need to be identified. This needs to be sorted out, and I don't think anybody disagrees with that. And how could you? But there was literally no promotion for this tournament. Like, it's all, I think we all realize Hockey Canada is trying to keep a low profile right now, but you got 2 huge events in the Holinka and the World Juniors, and we haven't hardly seen anything. So it's amazing that this tournament starts tomorrow. Like, it's really kind of like a low-key tournament, and on that side. For the UFWJ, it's going to be anything but low-key. We're going to be shouting this from the rooftops, and I really love what we're going to be doing right now. People can chime in live on our Twitch message board to ask us questions, but you are turning into a bit of a professor here because you're going to be handing out some grades here. And so we're going to talk about some rosters. We're going to take a look at some rosters, and then you'll hand out a before and an after grade. We'll talk about the before and after. I'll be able to chime in specifically from our country and how our strategy changed a little bit going into this tournament than what it was in the first tournament. But let's start with the first franchise, and that is the Republic of Seven Seas, and I'll let you take it away with their roster in December.
Dean, this was one franchise or one country that really took the dynasty league to heart and drafted a lot for the future. Mafi Mishkoff, you see their top forward. He could have played in 4 World Juniors. Dalibor Dvorsky can play in 3 World Juniors. Guy like Philip Masar and Marco Kasper and Uri Kulich. These are all guys that were going to be, potentially 3-year players, assuming they don't make the NHL in the meantime or aren't loaned back. But age-wise, they really drafted for the future. So maybe they didn't have the big ringers, although a guy like Mafi Mishkoff at 16 could have led the World Juniors in scoring. But when we're talking about that, obviously everybody knows Russia's out of the tournament. So the first overall pick, Dean, from the inaugural UFWJ draft back in December, Mafi Mishkov went ahead of Connor Bedard. And unfortunately for Republic of the Seven Seas, their franchise player is not only out for this tournament in August, but Russia is also out for the December tournament. So they lost 2 of those potential 4 years of Mafi Mishkov right off the bat. Tough losses there. They also have a guy, another Winnipeg Jets prospect there, Nikita Chibrikov, who's been a big-time player for Russia at international best-on-best events. But, I'll let you sort of transition us into the roster that they're left with. But when you look at it, Dean, built for the future, and they lost the most players of any country. They had the first pick in every round of the draft in December. 17 out of 25, including all 8 defensemen, were lost from this roster. So it was a rebuilding process for the Republic of the Seven Seas.
Exactly. And we'll look at their roster now, as you mentioned at the blue line. And, they did get Sean Behrens, but you can't compare it. The goaltending is somewhat similar than what it was before. But, when the top name in December is Mafi Mishkoff, and then, you look at this and he's not there in some of the names, like they did get some quality players. Obviously, there's some quality players that they were able to pick up. But there's just there's just no comparison when you look at the roster now, and it's unfortunate. You know what? I will give everybody credit. Not one bit of whining or saying this has to change from this franchise. They said this is the way it is. We're affected the most, but we're going ahead with it. So full marks to this. And would you expect anything less from a group led by Mooch, who is very respectful of the process, even if he doesn't agree. Sometimes he's respectful. So that's the thing that I love the most, is that they said, hey, we're affected, but let's move on with it.
First-class organization and led by Mooch Alinsky, the Seven Seas Blockchain Sports. But I really think, Dean, when you look at the management group here, you got Jeff Portoni. Yeah, let's put them together. We got Mick Portoni and Jeff Ray as a dynamic duo, and they work for Draft in Europe together in the Real World Scouting Agency. And when it comes to draft time, what do you want to do? You want to pick players. I mean, obviously you want Mafi Mishkoff back, but the fun of it is to do this supplementary draft and to have the most selections. And they drafted in the first round, the second round, the third round. It was 17 out of 25 rounds. It was almost like a complete redo. But again, they got some guys back. And I look at the goaltending, like you said, Levi Merilainen is going to be the starter for Finland. And Finland's expected to challenge for gold. So their goaltending's in great shape still. And then, they had the first pick in a lot of rounds, all 17 rounds that they picked in, they had the first pick in those rounds. They took Brennan Othman first overall, Dean, in the redraft or in the supplementary draft. That was somewhat of a surprise to me. I thought, my personal board going into the redraft, I really thought Atu Ratti and Thomas Bordelo were the two players that stood out above the pack. And the reason I say that, Dean, is because they were the two players that would have been at the December tournament. The only two players that are here in August that would have been at December but weren't are Atu Ratti and Thomas Bordelo due to positive COVID tests. Otherwise, they would have been key players already in December. Where a guy like Brennan Othman, he was at the camp. He didn't make the cut in December. Guys like Joshua Roy had a big second half of the season to play his way into position. Tyson Forster was in the AHL and was hurt. He couldn't play at Christmas. But generally speaking, I looked at the board and I thought Atu Ratti and Thomas Bordelo were 1A, 1B as far as who to take first overall in the draft. But Brennan Othman, you look what he did for the Flint Firebirds in the OHL, scoring machine. Looks like he's going to play on a line with William Dufour and Ridley Gregg. That's going to be a high-pace energy line. And Brennan Othman's a volume shooter. Shots on goal is one of the categories. So Bordelo and Ratti might not shoot the puck as much as Othman, so that might not be a bad pick. But when I look at their drafting, the way the supplementary draft played out, they took Brennan Othman with their first pick, first overall in the first round. They took Sean Barron's top defenseman. Again, when you have all 8 D spots to fill, you probably got to take a D at some point early on. And he was the best D available. But they passed up on, in the first round, Atu Ratti, and in the second round, Thomas Bordelo. Just the way the draft played out, they could have added Ratti and Bordelo. They came away with Othman and Barron. So, again, you don't want to critique it too much because the tournament hasn't happened, and maybe those two outplay Ratti and Bordelo. But they had the potential to grab the top 2 guys on my personal board. But overall, when we look at grading, Dean, I think it's like you said, it was just too much to overcome, and it was impossible to get back to where they started out. So I had them originally as a B draft because they were focused more on the future. Even though they had first overall pick, they took Mishkov over Bedard and some of the ringers that were available that were 19, 20-year-olds. And then when I look at the after, I dropped them down to a C. But again, when you go through these ratings and these grades, Dean, there's a lot of C's, and one of the C's has to step up likely and challenge for a medal. So it's not out of the question, especially with Levi Merilainen in goal. But I just keep coming back to the potential to have Ratti Bordelo as a 1-2 punch with the way the draft played out, and they came away with Othman and Barons instead. And again, 2 weeks from now, we'll know what was the right choice at first overall and 6th overall, but definitely Republic of the Seven Seas. When you take a guy like Brennan Othman, another thing to note, Dean, he's eligible again in December. So again, they're building for the future. They're going to reload. They're getting guys that are going to get multiple tournaments here. Whereas a guy like Atu Ratti, he's not going to be available in December. Highly unlikely. He's probably going to be playing pro hockey. And again, even a guy like Thomas Bordelo is going to be a potential impact player for the San Jose Sharks this season. So as they continue to build for the future, and the one nice thing about December, Dean, is a last thought for Republic of the Seven Seas, those 17 players, they're not going off into oblivion. They're sliding down to the reserve list. And I'm going to publish those reserve lists too, but you'll see the potential for a lot of these guys, even a guy like Philip Mazar. There's no reason to doubt that Montreal will have him at the December tournament. They just wanted him healthy and ready to go for training camp. So I think out of those 17 losses, when they have 10, 15 spots open, they might get 5 or 10 guys back. So it's going to be interesting to see how Republic of the Seven Seas looks come December. They also have a kid like Noah Ostlund, why Sweden brought 13 forwards instead of 14 when they have Noah Ostlund sitting there, and he could have played with Lekaramaki and Liam Ogren. It's crazy to leave Noah Ostlund at home, but who knows, Dean? Maybe he's got a bit of an injury or something going on as well. But Republic of the Seven Seas will have Noah Ostlund at that December tournament, a highly skilled, highly talented forward for the Buffalo Sabres as a first-round pick. So when you bring him up to that active roster in December and you really look at what Republic of the Seven Seas has, I think they're going to be back in the medal conversation for the December tournament.
Well, and certainly that they lost so much. Unfortunately, there's no way they could make it up for this tournament. There's just, they had to make too many picks, and so I think if the strategy was to build for almost December, I don't mind it. We might have employed the same strategy if we had to fill 14 or 17 slots as well. But we were thankful that we had the second overall pick, and we were able to get a good player, which we'll get into. But who had the second overall pick originally was Valter Cunha, and so this is what their roster looked like in December.
Yeah, and you look at this roster, as far as the returnees go, I mean, obviously Connor Bedard and Mason McTavish, to get them back as a 1-2 punch. Not only that, Dean, they're line mates. McTavish is centering Bedard on Canada's top line. Joshua Roy is on the left side, the left wing on that line. But, they have a lot of returnees. Isaac Rosen's back. Ridley Gregg's back. Landon Slaggert's wearing a letter for Team USA. You go up and down that list, even a guy like Dominic James as a later round pick is somebody that's really emerged throughout the season. Luke Hughes, I mean, you're getting your top 2 forwards back and your top defender back. Luke Hughes is huge. The one question mark for Valter Cunha is going to be in goal, because obviously Drew Commesso is not going to be the starting goaltender for the Americans. It's a big question mark who's going to be starting for them, but it won't be Drew Commesso, and they weren't able to replace him with another starting goaltender. So question marks in goal as to how many games played they're going to get, how those stats will work out. But when I look at just the pure returnees, the top forwards, and your number one defenseman, I think Valter Cunha is definitely going to be a medal contender at this tournament, just based on who they have coming back from December.
Well, I mean, we just flipped the roster over, and the big names, that's the difference. When you look at, the first country that we did, the before and after, it's like one of those home renovation shows. This is just a slight remodel. They just did one, like the den. They just did the little breakfast nook or something, and put up some new tile or something. I mean, the goaltending is really the one thing that they had a question mark. I mean, this roster is very, very similar. I think they lost the same amount of players as us, 7. And I mean, this is where we looked at this draft, and Ian and I were trying desperately to figure out, how do we get back in to this draft and try to get Thomas Bordelo when he kept dropping and dropping, because we had Bordelo and Ratty 1-2. And we thought, okay, we're going to take who they don't take in front of us. And then when both of them were there, it's like, oh, we have a decision to make now. And when Bordelo kept dropping, we were like, how do we get back in? And we looked at this saying, we're not going to go all out for this summer tournament. We want to save some of our, score or draft picks or young players to win a different tournament. But man, we were contemplating how to get back in. So for them, this is we're going to get to the grade in a second. For them to go into this draft and come out with the 2 guys, or to come out with Bordelo where they did, was incredible. And it fell to them. I don't even think they were drafting. It was just on their list. But I have a hard time seeing that they would have passed on Bordelo there. But maybe they would have, because everybody else seemed to.
Yeah, Dean, when you look that they didn't have a first-round pick in the supplementary draft, and Valter Cunha starting at 7th overall in the second round, what a gift to have Thomas Bordelo fall into your lap and to steal him in the second round. And you look at that forward group, the rich get richer, right? When you already have Bedard and McTavish, and now you have Bordelo added in there. And you look at, who was the top forward they lost from December. Bordelo's a much bigger name than the biggest name they lost. So, you look here, I'm just looking back at December here, and I don't even, Dean, do you have the December roster there?
I'm going to bring it up right now. I mean, it's like, there it is. There's not a lot of names that aren't there.
Yeah, and that's, so
that's
you look
crazy.
at Thomas Bordelo. So you look at, they lost the two Russians, Fedor Svechkov and Vasily Ponomarev. Two Russians are all they basically lost from their forward group. But you look at Svechkov or Bordelo. I'd rather have Bordelo. So they actually probably got better in this draft. And when you look at my grades, Dean, I mean, they got better. I graded Valtacunya as an A in December. And again, one thing to remember, Dean, is Connor Bedard is a lot better this summer than he was in December. I mean, he's tore up, set all kinds of records for 16-year-olds in the WHL, had a great second half. He didn't have a great first half. He really had his breakout in that one game at the World Juniors and then carried it through the second half, had a dominant second half in the WHL. And he's twice the player in August that he was in December, just from a maturity standpoint, and projected to be the first overall pick in next year's NHL draft. So getting an even better version of Bedard and upgrading with Thomas Bordelo, replacing a guy like Fedor Svechkov, I really think Valtacunya went from an A to an A+. And, the games are played on the ice, Dean, but right now that's the team to beat when I look at that forward group and see Luke Hughes there as their number one defenseman. The only question is in goal. And if they don't get many points from goaltending, and some other countries, get 30, 40, 50 points from goaltending, they're going to need those big guns to really light it up. But I think Valtacunya, George and Kevin Batchel, and Jope, the owner of the franchise from Finland, I think they got to be loving their chances of potentially being the first gold medal winner in Ultimate Fantasy World Junior history.
I mean, that just was incredible for them to get Bordelo where they did without having a first round pick. So, the grading is worthy, because I would rather have Bordelo than either of those Russians. So I think that grade is well deserved. And this brings us to East End now. And so we were sitting with the second pick in the supplementary draft. And as I mentioned, we had to replace Cole Perfetti. It's not like we got a Thomas Bordelo to replace, I don't know if there was anybody. I don't know if there's anybody in this redraft that is better. There isn't, in my opinion, better than Cole Perfetti. So it was a downgrade no matter what we were doing. But our strategy changed. I mean, in the first one, we loaded up on the one pool. Well, now the pools are different, and it's actually the other pool where we don't have a lot of players that have a lot of the weak sister teams. So we said, okay, well, instead of taking Bordelo and going with an American in that pool, let's continue and load up on the Finns. We loaded in Finns and Canadians, and that was our kind of strategy going in, and that's what we did. We had a few of them going into the draft, and we tried to load up on some more Finns as we'll bring in the post-draft roster. And Ratty was the guy. It was too hard to pass up with the other Finnish players that we have. And we're just hoping Canada-Finland has just a couple of monster games at this tournament.
And I do think you're going to see Canada-Finland play twice, Dean. They're the final game of the preliminary round. Believe it's next Saturday. And then I would be surprised if they don't face off for gold again. I think that they're the two best teams in this tournament. In my opinion. So I think loading up on the two best teams in the tournament's always a smart strategy. Like you said, you looked at Valtacunya, where they didn't lose, their top forward in Bedard or McTavish, whereas East End did lose Perfetti. And Perfetti to Ratty is a downgrade, but not a huge downgrade. I think Ratty, where does he slot there? Probably right above Roni Hirvonen. And you look at the Finns with Ratty, Hirvonen, and Samontavel. As a three-way, punch. And then also on defense, you have Puccio and Rafkin, who are going to be two of their top defenders. And, your defense didn't really change. You basically brought back your entire defense. So you got to be happy about that. Zellweger is probably, again, that much more mature than he would have been in December. He's likely going to quarterback him or Lucas Cormier, but probably I would lean towards Zellweger quarterbacking the top power play for Canada. Svozel's going to be a go-to guy. for Czechia, and also obviously has the experience with Bedard in Regina. He's been playing in the CHL and the WHL, so I think the smaller ice Svozil will be an impact player for Czechia. And then Kent Johnson. I mean, yeah, you lost Cole Perfetti, but you still got Kent Johnson. And as good as Bedard and McTavish are for Velta Cunha, Kent Johnson might be the tournament MVP. I mean, his skill level, he's probably the most talented, most skilled player in the tournament. I mean, obviously Bedard's going to make a case for that, but Johnson is an elite level skill player who's going to be, again, challenging for the Calder Trophy in the NHL as the NHL's Rookie of the Year this coming season. So it'll be a treat to watch Kent Johnson on this stage, and to get a guy like Aatu Räty, who really would have been the number one center for Finland in December. He would have been if he was there, and obviously he missed it because of a positive COVID test. So he was, when you're looking at a potential number one center that would have been a first or second round pick at that December draft, and now he's here available at number 2, that's a no-brainer. And again, Thomas Bordelo, quite similar. He might have been a second or third liner, probably a second liner for the Americans in December. Now he's looking like he'll be a first liner and a real go-to guy. Another guy who had a lot of maturity in the second half of the season and looked good in his pro debut at the end of the hockey season. So, but really impact-wise, I think Ratty's probably the biggest impact player. I had Ratty 1 and Bordelo 2. So, but to see Ratty here replacing Cole Perfetti, and then again, the rest of the forwards that you added, it's going to be interesting to see how the Latvians do. But you grabbed the other, I think there was only 2 Finnish forwards available. You grabbed both of them. You already had 2. Both are drafted by the Islanders, Ratty and Liukas, so you kept them together in camp. But goaltending, Dean, is going to be, does Brett Brochu get any games for Canada? Does he get a start? Does he end up as the starter? That's going to be so key, because we know Sebastian Ranicic is going to face a lot of rubber for Austria. Nikita Kapp and Bogle, I can't remember his name for Germany, but I think Bogle ended up being the starter in December for the first game. But again, it's only a 1-game thing. I'm sure Kapp's going to get into games. He's sort of the 1A, 1B there with Florian Bogle. So it'll be interesting to see what Germany does in goal. And again, if those two countries, they're not expected to make it past the quarterfinals, so you're not going to get those last 2 games of the semifinals and a medal game out of those 2, but potentially with no relegation, if they don't make the quarterfinals, then that obviously is a tough hit in goal. But overall, you get a guy like Charlie Stramel bumped up to the roster from the protected list. That's kind of a pleasant surprise, a guy who's potentially a top first rounder for 2023, but potentially a top player. And a guy like Adam Sikora, we're talking about guys that really improved in the second half. He went was dominant at the U18 tournament, had a great showing there, scored a goal at the men's world championship. So he's going to be sort of a go-to guy for Slovakia as well, Adam Sikora, especially without Uri Slavkowski and Philip Mazar. They're going to be leaning on Adam Sikora. He's going to get a ton of minutes and first power play unit, all the rest. So I really look at East End as pumped as I was about the Velta Cunha roster. When I see Kent Johnson there and Aatu Räty and that entire defense group back, I look at my grades, Dean, and I had East End as an A beforehand, because Cole Perfetti, you remember back to his Hlinka Gretzky Cup, he was so good at that summer tournament leading into his draft year. And I think, again, best on best age group, this is that same age group. Perfetti would have dominated that tournament in December. You lose Perfetti, but then you get a guy like Räty, who also was a high-end guy, would have been a first-line center in December. So really, I think you almost broke even. If you want to go an A- maybe, right? Maybe a slight downgrade, but basically the core group of East End and relative to the competition, you didn't take a step back. Other countries lost more and weren't able to make up as much. So I have East End sticking with an A before and A after.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, it was the simple thing of it was we only had to look at forwards. Like, we didn't have to we couldn't take anybody else, because our entire blue line and all 3 of our goalies came back. Now, losing the relegation hurts us. That was a brilliant strategy that Ian came up with, to go with Ranicic, because he's going to face a lot of rubber, and we were expecting maybe another 3 games. So that's going to hurt us. I'll say this, if we win, it's probably because Brett Brochu gets in some medal round games, because if he doesn't, then we don't have a goalie in the entire medal round. So it'll be interesting. Like I said, Canada, Finland, if they play twice and there are a couple of heaters, then that's going to do well for us. Last year, or December, the reason we got bumped into second is because we had a big day from our Finns and our Canadians, and it pushed us up. So, listen, I'm excited about our team. I think we can challenge. I think we can win a medal for sure. As long as we beat Anarchia, I'll be happy. And, I can see down at Arnie from higher up in the standings. So that's really our gold medal, is to beat Arnie and Anarchia. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's a fair grade. And, I think we have as good a chance as almost anybody. We were able to, we picked at 2 and 28. There was a lot of groans in between there where guys were going or guys were dropping. We thought we might get them, and then we didn't. But it was a real fun process. I'm happy with how our roster looks. And, now it's about managing it. Thankfully, listen, I'm not going to deny we have a guy on the inside that is right there calling the games, and Craig Button, that can maybe give us some tips and some pointers on the roster, because that's going to be just as important on some days as making sure you start the right guy. Start the right goalie or the wrong goalie, and you could be in big trouble.
And you mentioned Craig, Dean, you mentioned your dad, getting excited watching East End, and the logo, the Wolves, inspired by your dad. Such a great family story, and an honorary captain to your dad as well. Like, just a great family story. But then Craig also, he's sitting there calling the games, and when he sees Kent Johnson score a goal, he's going to get a little extra excitement, a little extra jolt. Or Atu Ratty has a big game, because Craig's pretty invested in UFWJ, and he's enjoying following it. So he's got to make sure he doesn't start talking about East End on the broadcast and saying what a goal by Atu Ratty for East End. But I think Craig's going to have a blast following along, and we certainly appreciate having Craig as such a great ambassador for not only for UFWJ, but the UFHL and the Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports platform as a whole. Tracking the draft is such an awesome program. Can't wait to hopefully get that back again next season. But Craig's brought a lot to UFWJ, helped with a lot of the promo. And for Craig's sake, I hope East End has a strong showing and he can enjoy the tournament that much more, because he's another guy that probably would have been at the lake or playing pickleball all summer. Yeah. I don't know what Craig does in August, but he doesn't. I guess he does the Hlinka Gretzky Cup always, but then he gets a couple weeks off before NHL again. Well, now he's got to stick it out a little longer in Edmonton and cover the World Juniors. But as we said, Dean, for hardcores like us, and Craig's as hardcore as it gets, I'm sure he would rather be covering the World Juniors and being an analyst and a color commentator with Gord Miller than he would be out there playing pickleball or something hazardous like that. I'm sure he'd rather be in the press box covering the World Juniors.
Indeed, and enjoying the UFWJ. Let's move on to Monstopia. Pretty cool logo. I love all the countries in the UFWJ. I love the creativity. This is the Monstopia roster in December. What sort of stands out to you from this? And then we'll get to what they look like now.
Yeah, if defense and goaltending wins championships, Dean, you might be looking at another medal contender here, because Jesper Wallstad was awesome in that first couple of games. Again, 3-day sample size in December, but Jesper Wallstad is the best goaltender in this. He's expected to win, contend for tournament MVP, and he's backstopping Monstopia. They also have Sweden's top defenseman, Simon Edmondson. David Jurasek had a positive COVID test, but he's going to play for Czechia. He's in Edmonton. And Ryan O'Rourke, again, we're working our way down the defense chart. The injury to Damon Hunt really opened the door for Ryan O'Rourke to have a bigger role as sort of a second pairing guy, probably going to do a lot of penalty killing for Canada. A real leadership, a real glue guy. I really like Ryan O'Rourke. And you mentioned the elephant in the room, Dean. If people haven't listened to the interview with Ryan O'Rourke, they've done a lot of educating throughout this camp on sexual violence and the sexual assault and abuse and consent and all that stuff. And listening to Ryan O'Rourke talk about some of the seminars they've had and some of the educational process they've went through, such a mature kid. His interview on that, they usually on SportsCenter or something, it's not that it's canned quotes, but usually it's a quick hit on each person, and just to say they did it and it was a learning experience. He went into some real detail, and I think they gave him like almost a minute of SportsCenter that night to elaborate on his thoughts on the process and what they learned and the takeaways, and just a very well-spoken, articulate young man, and a guy that's going to have a bigger role for Canada now as well. So Monstopia, the top three on D, and not only the starting goaltender, Dean, depending what happens with Florian Bugel, and I know you don't want to see him start for Germany because you got Nikita Kapp there as the other potential starter, but they also are welcoming back Noah Patnode, who was their original draft pick from Switzerland's projected starting goaltender, and he actually I believe he was injured in a pre-tournament game and was going to miss the December tournament. He's back on the roster as well for Switzerland, and they welcomed him back. So potentially 3 starting goaltenders and 3 real impact defenders for Monstopia. But again, you mentioned Dylan Guenther as a guy that's a big loss. Danila Yurov would have been an Alexander Pashin. Both those guys would have been, top 6 forwards, wingers for Russia. Tanner Dickinson also isn't back. So neither is Brabanek. So, I mean, you look at that, they got 1 forward, Matt Coronado, out of their top 6. So you look at their top 6 forwards, they only had 1 returnee. One thing that was looking good for Monstopia, Dean, was it looked like they were going to get a couple boosts from their protected list with obviously Frank Nazar and Jonathan Lekaramaki, who they drafted in advance, which smart drafting to grab those 2 guys, thinking they'd have them for the next December. Well, Jonathan Lekaramaki made Sweden, and he was probably their best player in these pre-tournament games. So he's going to be a potential power play guy and all the rest for Sweden already, because Sweden doesn't have Alexander Holtz or William Eklund. They lost 2 of their big ringers. So all of a sudden, Jonathan Lekaramaki goes from the protected list for Monstopia to a key top 6 role for Sweden. Frank Nazar, though, unfortunately, as well as Simon Bakar, their defenseman from Slovakia, were both cut today. They were among those final cuts. So Monstopia's work's not done yet. They got 2 picks to go in this supplementary draft 3.0. But you look at that returning roster, Dean, and what I really see there is, again, only 1 returning forward out of your top 6. You get lucky that you get Jonathan Lekaramaki coming up from the protected list, who's obviously a qualified top 6 forward, although a really young guy. And again, this tends to be a tournament for older players to dominate. They're a little bit more physically mature. And enter William Dufour, their top pick, their first round pick or second round pick, I believe, in the supplementary draft. But Dufour just had a really big, strong showing. I think I said Hamilton won the Memorial Cup, but they didn't. St. John, the host, won. Thanks to William Dufour. He was huge for them at the Memorial Cup. And he had just a name that not a lot of people recognize, because I think he was a 4th round pick, but a guy that's just skyrocketing. His stock is skyrocketing with the year he had.
Or something like that.
Yeah, just a massive year in the queue, and the Islanders need some forward prospects to pop. Atu Ratty's looking good, and so is William Dufour. So you got Coronado, who's going to have a big role for the U.S. and going to get another volume shooter. Lekaramaki and William Dufour are 3 good forwards, but the rest of that forward group, not to say they're not good, but they don't stack up with East End. They don't stack up with Valtacunya. Where they do stack up is on defense and certainly in goal with Jesper Wallstad. So still a medal contender. But when I look at my grade for Monstopia, Dean, I had them as a B in December when they had, Guenther and the 2 Russians. And now I have them as a C+. So I think they're close to staying the same with a B. But again, when you lose 5 of your top 6 forwards, even though you get Lekaramaki, even though you have Wallstad coming back and you got Edmondson and Urasek there, it's still a step back. They don't have the firepower up front that they had in December, and I think that'll prevent them from meddling potentially. But again, you're talking defense and goaltending winning championships. If all 3 of those goalies are starters, and they can, again, you can only start 1 per day, right? Only 1 goalie starts per day in UFWJ. But if you can get the schedule to work out that you get starts every day from those 3, all of a sudden Monstopia could be racking up some goaltending points and staying right in the medal hunt.
Yeah, it really is. With your forwards and your defensemen, you're usually going to be okay. But it's picking that right goalie. And, you want your goalie on the bench with a shutout, and your other goalie gives up 7 or something. And, if you're, I'll take our team, use our country as an example. If we decide to go with Renaissance instead of Brochu, and Brochu gets a shutout and Renaissance gets pulled, well, then it backfires on us. But if Brochu starts and faces 12 shots and Renaissance faces 50 and gives up 7 even, you did the math earlier, I'm not going to try to do math live again, it works out. So thanks to everybody for joining us on our Twitch channel, by the way. Chime in on the message board, 7Cs. Great job, Larry. Of course, always spectacular. Encyclopedia-like knowledge. Even Ian and I were like no idea who some of these guys are during the draft, and you just had them bang on. So we always appreciate the knowledge. We're on team number 4, so let's get to country number 4. So that was Monstopia. Now let's get to Elite Prospectia, who did something really cool in the inaugural version of this tournament. They let Twitter fans pick their players. Obviously, the August one is a little bit harder to coordinate, but let's take a look at what the roster was like in December when they were letting Twitter followers, except for that first pick in Shane Wright, who they made the executive decision on, rightfully so, because they didn't know Wright was going to be available. But a really interesting concept for how they put this roster together in December.
It was a lot of fun to see that. And they were getting like 200 votes in a matter of like 10 minutes. Like, it was incredible to see the uptake from their community. And that just shows the interest in the World Juniors and the interest in UFWJ, how many votes they were getting in between each round to, when they threw up, these 4 guys might be available for us next round. Who do you want to take? It was so fun to follow. And you mentioned Shane Wright, Dean, and obviously you had a vested interest in Shane Wright at that time at the World Juniors as well. He was property of high-level scouting at that time. And it was, going into the World Juniors, Shane Wright was still, at that point, the consensus number 1 overall pick. There wasn't even anybody else really necessarily in the conversation heading into the World Juniors. So, like you said, Wright fell into their lap at that point. And to have Wright in power, it looked like they were going to, and again, this is December. Now we have the hindsight of being through June. But in December, it looked like it was going to be, they were going to have back-to-back first overall picks in the NHL draft. Owen Power from the 2021 draft and Shane Wright from the 2022 draft. And now, of course, neither of them are on Canada's roster for the summer tournament. So again, as we've said with some other countries, including start off the top with the Republic of the Seven Seas and Mooch's franchise, when you lose your first and your second overall pick, and then or your first and second round pick, and then you see a country like Valtacunia return their first and second round picks, it's that's just such a blow. I look at Wright and Power missing is massive. Jake Neighbors, another guy who's gearing up for an NHL season, believe he's overcoming an injury, as is Xavier Bourgault. So those guys are recovering and training in the offseason. They're not going to be there. So you lose 4 key members of Team Canada. They drafted a lot from Team Canada. They lose 4 out of their 5, with the 5th one being Logan Stankoven, who's going to have a huge role for Canada and had a great second half as well. But when Logan Stankoven has to replace not only Shane Wright, he's also got to replace Xavier Bourgault and Jake Neighbors. It's just too much. And you look at the one pleasant surprise when you look at the now roster was they got Simon Knack back, who was projected to be probably the go-to guy for Switzerland, probably Switzerland's best forward. He was in their initial or in the inaugural draft. They had selected Simon Knack, I think in the 8th or 9th round. And he was going to miss the tournament, and now he's back. So they got a pleasant surprise getting Knack back, but just too much firepower gone off the top. And they did take Tyson Forster as their first round pick. But again, you got Tyson Forster, who's now trying to replace both Shane Wright and Jake Neighbors and Xavier Bourgault. Like, Tyson Forster's a good player, but he's not 3 players, right? So you can tell that forward group is missing those 3 Canadians.
Yeah, and listen, Tyson Forster, I really liked him in his draft year. He needs a good tournament. Maybe that's why he's available in this tournament, because he's had a little bit of trouble the last couple of years. And, this is a guy that maybe needs a big tournament to get going and sort of get back on track. But, when you look at the losses, this is a franchise you were really high on, obviously, when you looked at the before roster. But again, might be a little bit too much to overcome heading into the summer.
Yeah, Dean, this was my gold medal winner going back to December. A+, I had them as a before ranking. Again, they lost their top 2 defensemen in Power and Shakir McCamadoulan. They lost 3 of their 4 Canadian forwards. The one area where Elite Prospectia potentially is better going into the summer tournament, Dean, is in goal, because Jakub Malik was trending to be the starting goaltender for Czechia. He's not back for this August tournament. So it's looking like, I almost called him Daniel Vlader, but Jan Bednar is looking like he's going to be the starting goaltender for Czechia. But they also drafted Cajun who's going to compete with Vladar for that starting job. So they got the 1-2 for Czechia, presumed 1-2. So they're likely going to get some good goaltending out of Czechia. Although again, that team's got to perform, and I think Czechia's probably the fifth place team in this tournament, just because Slovakia is missing their big three. But again, they're going to need a big effort from their Czechia goaltenders, and I give them a B with the after. And again, that's just, like I said, Tyson Forster is great, but he's not Shane Wright, Jake Neighbors, and Xavier Borgo all wrapped up into one, right? So where in East End's case, you lost Cole Perfetti, but you got Atu Ratty. Here you lost Shane Wright, Jake Neighbors, and Xavier Borgo, and you come away with Tyson Forster and a guy like Simon Knack, who will help coming back. But I think as a B, Elite Prospectia will, depending how Czechia's goaltending holds up, I think they're going to be on the cusp of kind of like where they were, through 3 days. They're going to be in that battle for bronze, I'll say.
Well, I mean, you basically just listed an entire top line, and I like Tyson Forster, but he's not better than any of those guys right now. So in my opinion, you take a top line away from any country in this tournament and you don't give them anybody better, it's going to be, it's hard to keep your head above water in those circumstances. And it's unfortunate. We'll go right to the message board with this. By the way, Mooch says, nice to see Dean back in the fold as well. Congrats on UFLB scouting. Yeah, that was announced earlier today that I'm going to be the new director of scouting for UFLB. Obviously something that I loved, and I put a lot of time and work into helping get off the ground. So it's good to be back. And also we'll be hosting Inside UFLB. So that's very exciting as well. And I don't know, you want to announce the other show that I'll be doing, Larry?
Yeah, Dean, it's great to announce that we're going to keep you busy. I mean, we got you doing the scouting with UFLB, and everybody loves Inside UFLB. It was a great show, and everybody loves UFHL now. And obviously, you had stepped aside, and your plate was full, and we had brought Kyle Hall on for a few months to be the host. But through technology throwing us a curveball, Kyle's kind of been taken out as host, and you've stepped up to resume hosting UFHL now for the coming season. Hopefully we get her started in September, get some season preview episodes, but really happy to have you back in the host saddle, both with two of your passions and your loves, baseball and hockey, and now helping out in the scouting as well. So like I said, your plate's getting a lot fuller in a hurry, but you got a lot of exciting stuff in the works for the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Twitch channel especially, and you're a valuable team member on the media side. We're looking forward to having you back in the host seat.
Well, I'm just grateful to everybody that I was able to step away, get things sorted out, and then be able to come back and join the team. It's fun. We have some really amazing things that we're going to be announcing in the next little while, not just UFHL now and Inside UFLB, but something else that I'll be a part of that we'll keep in the bag for right now, but some really fun stuff. Mooch also saying very happy with the job Jeff and Mick did with our team under difficult circumstances, and Andrew Grover, an excellent job with our RSS Twitter. Yeah, they knocked that out of the park. We should really mention that. And they had the toughest job of all. And as I mentioned earlier when we got on, not a peep, not a single complaint or anything. They just went with it. So big ups to them for that. And also the amazing job they did on social media.
Yeah, Dean, I was just going to say that the Republic of the Seven Seas on social was maybe the best showing. And if you're not following them, they are at Rep7Cs. So at Rep7Cs, all lower cases, the Twitter handle, but just an awesome job by Andrew Grover, highlighting their entire roster, live updates throughout the draft after every round, including digging up photos of every prospect. And you said it, Dean, as you get into those later rounds and with 17 picks to replace, some of those players were, even for myself, pronouncing the names was a battle. But even, if you quizzed me wanting scouting reports on some of the guys that were going after, even outside of the, we went 30 rounds deep, even outside of round 10 or round 15, I would have been scrambling to tell you more than a sentence or two. I might have got their position right and their age, but there was a lot of new players in this tournament in August it's such a cool opportunity for them to showcase their talent, because they're maybe they might have made the B team necessarily if some of these top guys weren't there. So But the work that Republic of the Seven Seas is doing on social media, particularly on Twitter, great job to Andrew, and Mick's right. I mean, or not Mick, Mooch is right. Mick and Jeff, considering the position that they were in with 17 players to redraft, and the fact they lost their first, second, and third round picks. And again, and I think, knowing that they had lost that many players, I think that draft strategy, the more I think about it, the more they're looking at December. There's a very good chance Brennan Othman and Sean Behrens, their first and second round picks, are going to be there in December. So they're building for December, knowing that they lost so much that it's going to be hard to medal here in August. So again, it's a dynasty league, and yeah, maybe they do. Those are two of the smartest guys we know in the UFHL hockey world, Mick and Jeff. They didn't sleep on Atu Ratty or Thomas Bordelo. They probably thought, okay, we draft them. They're our number one player, but then they're one and done. And, are we going to draft them and trade them? And actually, they were looking at potentially trading the first round pick. And I believe they even name dropped Ratty and Bordelo as who wants to come draft Ratty and Bordelo. And then they came out and drafted Brennan Othman first overall, again, with that eye on December. So they really understand it's a dynasty league. And I think Republic of the Seven Seas, whether it's the 2023 tournament or the 2024 tournament, it's only a matter of time till Mooch adds a UFWJ gold medal to the mantle alongside his the Golden Bowl from the American Football Legends League, which the Fury brought home, the inaugural title there. So Seven Seas Blockchain Sports will be getting some more hardware sooner than later, I'm sure, from UFWJ.
Mooch confirming on the Twitch message board, yes, December was a big consideration. And you mentioned them not sleeping on those prospects. I don't think they sleep at all because the draft was probably about 3 a.m. for those guys. So good on them for being involved in that. And another thing, that they're at a time disadvantage for a lot of our events, and they're great people. And certainly very happy to have them involved, as we are with a lot of the countries that are dipped in. We just talked about Mooch. He's in everything. So is the next country we're going to talk about, Can West. Very big players, very, very skilled on the scouting side, and also looking to be players in the World Juniors. This is their December roster. So what'd you like about this roster?
I think this might be the August roster.
This is actually,
that popped up here, Dean. This is
I'll pop the other one in.
One, but again, Can West with the Johnson brothers, Curtis and Chad, two huge hockey family, huge hockey guys. Curtis trains a lot of these guys that are at the World Juniors, or has trained them over the years, and then certainly, Chad was a goaltender in the NHL for more than a decade, so. A lot of hockey knowledge, and they really know this age group because they've worked with them over the years. But much like we just talked about, Dean, with Elite Prospectia, when you lose your first and second round pick, or first, second, third round pick, same with Republic of the Seven Seas, it really puts you behind the eight ball. And Matty Beniers would have been, the star of the tournament for the U.S. And we talk about Thomas Bordelo coming in. He's basically taking Matty Beniers' spot. But they also lose Caden Gooley, who would have been the captain of Team Canada, one of their go-to defenseman, just won a WHL championship with his hometown Edmonton Oil Kings. And Joel Blomqvist would have been the starting goaltender, likely for Finland, or competing for the starting goaltender job. I think he was the starter in December. That's why he was a second-round pick. Now, as we mentioned, Republic of the Seven Seas with Levi Merilainen is going to end up being the starter for Finland. But they lost their number one goaltender. They still have a starter, Dean. Simon Lakozy is going to be the starter for Slovakia, and we've seen him have some heroics in this tournament as sort of a revelation a couple of years ago. He's going to need that again with Slovakia's, as mentioned, the big three, Slavkowski, Simon Nemitz, their top D, and also Philip Meza are all absent. Lakozy's going to have to be a stud for Slovakia and for Can West in goal. But again, when you lose guys like Beniers and Caden Gooley especially, those are just spots that, the talent just wasn't there in the redraft to fully replace those guys. And then, I do look at even a guy like Pavel Novak, who I think would have put up a lot of points for Czechia. Unfortunately, a guy that I know a little bit through the Kelowna Rockets here was diagnosed with cancer this offseason, and he's recovering on that end and won't be at the tournament either. So up and down the roster, all three positions, they're their top player essentially at all three positions, Beniers, Gooley, or Caden Gooley and Joel Blomqvist. That when you lose your top player at all three positions and you only get one first-round pick, it's an uphill battle to get back into that medal contention.
Mm-hmm. This is the roster now that we're looking at after the supplemental draft. And you mentioned it. There was, some franchises are going into this and they have, no questions on maybe the top half and the blue line, but goaltending could be a question mark. Goaltending can win this tournament. Like goaltending, especially if there's a team that goes on maybe an unexpected run or a goaltender that, really, really has a couple of strong games. If you had a strong returning goaltender, you have a chance in this tournament. I'll be honest, that's the one thing we're worried about. It's the one thing that could keep us out of the medal round is goaltending. The one thing that might propel a team or a country is goaltending.
Definitely. And Simon Lecozzi, when we talk about goaltenders that are going to face a lot of shots and are capable of stopping a lot of shots, he certainly comes to mind for Slovakia. When I look at this supplementary supplementary draft roster, Dean, another country that really looked towards December with a guy like Liam Öhgren in their first round, they didn't take Thomas Bordelo. They took Liam Öhgren because you're going to get him for two tournaments and most likely 3. If he doesn't make Minnesota next season, he's going to play in the following December as well. So potentially 3 tournaments out of Liam Öhgren. They already have Oscar Oleson as another impact winger from Sweden. So that was an interesting first round pick because, like I said, you see Bordelo falling and then he gets by Can West. And again, he would have been the replacement for Matty Beniers. So Matty Beniers out, Thomas Bordelo in. Can West had that opportunity, but they're looking to the future a little bit as well with a potential 3-year guy or 3 tournament guy in Liam Öhgren. They also grabbed Joshua Roy in the second round. When you and Arnie could tell us all about Joshua Roy, but he was a guy, Dean, that was a phenom in Quebec coming up, potential, first overall pick, all this stuff, and then had a down draft year, ended up being a 5th round pick by the Montreal Canadiens of all teams, and flipped the switch, and he's right back, in a redraft, he's back in the first round, and he's actually flanking. He's on Canada's first line with Mason McTavish and Connor Bedard. So, you go from Beniers to Öhgren, and you lose some of those, a guy like Pavel Novak, and then you bring back a guy like Joshua Roy, and actually the other one there, Hunter McCowan, is a really interesting player, Dean. You don't hear this much with Canada and American players in this tournament that go through all 3 years of draft eligibility, undrafted, and make the World Juniors. Again, this is a bit of I don't want to say watered down tournament, but I think that's where you're seeing some of these players show up. But Hunter McCowan, from the pre-tournament games and stuff, I mean, he might be a second, third line center and might have a pretty big role all of a sudden, along with a guy like Carter Mazur, who's coming back for Can West. So they got a couple American forwards still. Like, this is a team that, and Jacob Truscott was a pretty wily pick on defense to replace Aidan Hareshek. But I think if they would have went Bordelo and to replace Beniers instead of Leah Öhgren, if they really wanted to focus on medaling this summer, I think Bordelo would have been the pick. But again, an eye to the future and knowing a lot of guys, even a guy like Zion Nybeck and those guys will be back potentially in December. So I think when I look at the grade for Can West, Dean, I had them as an A in December. Again, having Matty Beniers and Caden Gooley and Joel Blomqvist, their top 3 best player at every position is essentially eliminated. I only dropped them to a B because I really like the 3 years of Liam Öhgren. And I think he's going to be a player in this tournament. I mean, I think he's a mature player and he's a volume shooter. Again, a guy that I think will have an impact already this year or this summer. And then also, Joshua Roy, if he sticks on that top line and gets some power play time, that could be quite the second round pick. And they got him 2 picks ahead of Arnie, who with Anarchia's first pick had to be licking his lips, seeing Joshua Roy sliding towards him. Obviously, Arnie signed Joshua Roy with pipeline prospects and also promoted him to the Royals, their affiliated franchise in the UFHL. But nonetheless, Can West comes out, as we mentioned with a bunch of these countries, Dean, you can't replace your best player at every position in a supplementary draft. You just can't do it. So a bit of a downgrade from an A to a B. But again, we're talking about a number of countries, whether it's a B or a C, that are going to be. And you mentioned goaltending, which goaltender steps up in that battle for bronze is what I'm calling it. Because as we've seen, I'm really high on Valta Cunha and really high on East End. And now it's a matter of who's going to be in that battle for bronze.
Well, and listen, I love the Holmgren situation. I mean, he was a guy that I had, I think I had him ranked third in my rankings because of the fact that, he's a smart guy that's going to take Eklund's spot, who's, a guy that they're going to want to replace, so he's going to get good playing time, plus the fact that he's coming back so much. So I like the different strategies, just like I love the different strategies in the UFHL. We have all kinds of different strategies with franchises. Duckman's dominations, we tore down and rebuilt. Some go for it all the way. So I like seeing the different strategies in the World Juniors in the UFWJ as well. I mentioned earlier, I also love the logos. This is one logo that I love, the flag for Scoreaway. What do you think of the before roster in December for Scoreaway?
Well, and we've seen those standings through 3 days, Dean. Scoreaway was leading the way. And again, going into that December tournament, Uri Slavkowski, now we know he was the number 1 overall pick by Montreal, but at that time he was sort of in that 4 to 6 range still. He wasn't, he had a big start to that tournament. Brad Lambert, everybody was down on Brad Lambert. He had a big start to that tournament. Obviously, they had the ringer in Alexander Holtz, who was loaned by New Jersey back to Sweden. So, and obviously Joachim Kemmel was a real volume shooter who was tearing up the Liga heading into the World Juniors. And they had, a real good pairing of Swedish blue liners. They had the Czechia starter, Jakub Malik, who got in a good game or two there. So all in all, when I'm looking at that December roster, I think I wasn't as high on them as I was on like Elite Prospectia or even Can West in December. And I think that was because I underestimated how good Uri Slavkowski could be, how good Brad Lambert would come out of the gates. A lot of things were coming up Scoreaway, and even a guy like Elliot Desnoyer was having a great impact for Canada and might again in August. I mean, he's sort of a third, fourth line energy guy, but he had a really good game. So in that initial 3 day small sample size, Scoreaway was leading the way. So how can you not say they drafted well in December? And now it's just a matter of where are they going to situate with this new look roster. And again, they got the Finns just like East End. They're relying on Kemmel and Lambert as their sort of 1-2 punch up front. But again, you lose a guy like Alexander Holtz. Who's going to replace Alexander Holtz? Goaltending here, again, they tried to grab a Latvian goaltender. They took the first Latvian goaltender. I have no idea, Dean. The 3 Latvian goaltenders, they're all under 6 feet tall. I don't know which one's the starter, but Bruno Bruverius, and there have been some great Latvian goaltenders. I mean, Elvis Merzlikins in the NHL, I believe, is Latvian. There's a number of them, but Bruno, if he's the starter for Latvia, he's going to face a lot of rubber. That might be, I think he played in North America with Cedar Rapids in the USHL, so that might be a sneaky good pick. But otherwise, goaltending's a question mark now without Malik. That's a downgrade no matter how you look at it in goal. And again, losing some of the firepower up front with Alexander Holtz, they come back and draft Nathan Gaucher, who's going to be Nathan Gaucher and Riley Kidney are depth players for Canada, currently kind of in and out of the lineup on the 4th line. Not sure who's going to grab that spot. Riley Duran's a guy that's going to get some playing time for the U.S. in a depth role. But again, we're not talking about there's no Alexander Holtz coming into this lineup. Because he was actually a 2nd round pick for them. So even though they lost a stud like Alexander Holtz, they didn't have a 1st round pick in the supplementary draft. So Nathan Gaucher was the best player they could get at 13th overall. And so, yeah, I mean, Holtz to Gaucher is a big drop off. And now watch Nathan Gaucher have his coming out party at this tournament. But Scoreaway needs that. They need some of these supplementary draft guys to really step up. Gabriel Sturz is, I believe that's how you pronounce it. He's here, another Czechia forward that played as an import for the Kelowna Rockets last season, teammate with Pavel Novak. And with Novak missing the summer tournament, it was actually Gabriel Sturz that got to take his spot on Team Czechia. So Kelowna Rockets teammates, 1 out, 1 in. So Gabriel Sturz will be trying to represent Pavel Novak as well in that tournament, his good friend. So I look for him to have a decent role for Czechia. But overall, Dean, I go from a B to a C for Scoreaway. Again, it's Alexander Holtz and Jakub Malik. You weren't able to replace either of those high-end talents and a starting goaltender. in the supplementary draft. So Scoreway, they were leading the standings in December, and now they're going to be in that battle for bronze, but likely on the outside looking in of the medals, unless that Brad Lambert question from the chat, unless Brad Lambert comes out and is one of the leading scorers for Finland along with Joakim Kemmel, then all of a sudden Scoreway might be right back in the medal hunt.
Well, and that's honestly, Larry, that's all it takes is a little bit of hot streak and some, confidence, and you never know. I mean, I still think we can predict the top 4 countries that are going to make the medal rounds, in a World Junior tournament. But you never know. In a as you mentioned, a different kind of a tournament. Not obviously the big stars aren't there. I still think we can look at the top 4 countries in this tournament, but stranger things certainly have happened. As we take a look at Midgard, another very, very clever and cool name and country and everything. How about the roster? What did you think of the roster in December?
Yeah, Dean, the branding of these countries, it's easy to come up with a franchise name in the UFHL, like name it after a mascot or whatever. Everybody does that in their home fantasy leagues, but now you got to create it. And what's your country name going to be? And a lot of cool ones, including Midgard, which, to be honest, Dean, this was a country that was put together, had 4 professional athletes from 3 different sports, including Dave the Hammer Schultz as part of the ownership group here. But their management group wasn't necessarily, scouting this age group, right? So going into the draft, 2 days before the draft, Dan Esposito kind of heads up this country, was saying, I better get a GM here because I only know a handful of these 300 players we're going to be drafting. This isn't my age group of expertise for scouting. So they reached out to the UFHL, and Luke Schonweiss of the Eliminators jumped at the opportunity and came into the fold as Midgard's an ownership partner. He's now part of the ownership group, but also the general manager, but with 48 hours to prepare for the draft. And it was hard to step into, right? And I think looking back at December and the standings, Midgard was bringing up the rear by a significant margin. And you look at the draft, the before roster here looks a lot like some of the after rosters that were decimated, right? They don't have the same high-end firepower. But when I think about Midgard, a surprising pick they made, Dean, in the December draft. We saw Drew Camiso was a pick in the 2nd round. USA starting goaltender Valter Cunha took him. A couple picks later, still in the 2nd round, Kaden Mrbareko went to Midgard, and that raised a lot of eyebrows at the time because he was, maybe number 3 behind Dylan Silverstein, who should be at this tournament in August, but he's actually unavailable as well for the U.S. So Camiso and Silverstein are both unavailable for the summer, and all of a sudden, Kaden Mrbareko is the only returning goaltender for Team USA, along with 2 newcomers that we'll talk about in a bit. But suddenly, that 2nd round pick looks like Midgard might all of a sudden have the starting goaltender for Team USA as well. They took Logan Cooley with their 1st round pick. Back in December again, Dean, we keep going back, and Logan Cooley and Uri Slavkowski, they were known commodities, but they weren't expected to get drafted ahead of Shane Wright in the NHL draft back in December. So the fact Cooley also went ahead of Wright at 3rd overall, I think, he's a guy that's super talented, a real offensive catalyst type guy. I actually compare him a little bit to Clayton Keller, who's already with the Arizona Coyotes, but a real talented offensive-minded guy, and I think he's going to be, especially without Matty Beniers and now have Thomas Bordelo come into the tournament, I think Logan Cooley's role grew that much more for Team USA as well. So again, when you look at it that way, their 1st and 2nd round picks, Cooley and Mrbareko from Team USA, are actually in a better position now, Dean, in August than they would have been in December, as is a guy like Redmond Savage, who I know high-level scouting believe has his rights, but Red Savage, son of former NHLer Brian Savage, might be Team USA's best player through the pre-tournament games. He had a 2-goal game and had a couple points in the other one, looking like he'll have a fairly significant role on this Team USA as well. So as one of the rare cases, Dean, where a country is coming back in August and actually might be better than they would have been in December, although they were bringing up the rear in December. So are they better enough that they could contend for a medal? Probably not. But also should note, Dean, that Tal Clot has been brought on to help Luke Seanwise. Tal was hired as the GM of the Eliminators, Luke's franchise in the UFHL. He also helped with this draft strategy. And I thought they had a strong draft, almost as strong as anybody, getting guys like William Wallander. And again, they had their first and second round pick come back. So they didn't have an early pick, but they managed to get a guy like William Wallander. Don't know what Finland's doing with their number 2 goaltender, but Yanni Lampinen might get some game time in for Finland potentially. So all in all, I went from a D, and that was the lowest grade in December, D for December. And again, that was kind of Luke was, thrust into a position to draft this franchise or this country's roster without really knowing the player pool that well or much time to prepare. And now coming back in August, I have them at a C-. So I still have them overall bringing up the rear, but they're actually in a better position going into August than they were at the December tournament, in my estimation.
Yeah, it's that's tough. I mean, getting thrown into that situation when you don't know the players and you only have a couple of days. So good on them to come out with a higher grade, and obviously doing a lot more homework going into the supplemental draft. All right, this is the country that we need to beat. Like, this is like if the Oilers have a bad season but they win the season series with the Flames, people like it. If we don't win a medal but we finish ahead of Anarchia, we'll be fairly satisfied, as we've got a pretty good rivalry going with them, and obviously having a lot of fun with it. But this is the before roster, and obviously some talented players that we know very well from Duckman's domination. But what do you like about this roster originally?
Well, Dean, the goaltending. They have Canada's potential tandem. Sebastian Cossa was drafted ahead of Dylan Garand, but we all know in December Dylan Garand ended up being the starting goaltender for Team Canada, and he was also the CHL, or at least the WHL goaltender of the year, potentially the CHL goaltender of the year. But he actually outshone Sebastian Cossa at the World Juniors and the rest of the season after the World Juniors. But to have both of them, if Canada, Finland, if Canada's still the gold medal favorite, if that's what people think, then as far as goaltending goes, Anarchia is in great shape still. To get both those guys back was huge. Obviously, up front, William Eklund was their top forward, and they lost him. But then I look at the defense team, and they got back their 1-2 defense punch of Lucas Cormier and Brock Faber, 2 guys that are going to produce from the back end. So I think that Battle of Alberta, that East End Anarchia, is still going to be alive and well come this August tournament. I can't wait to see the fireworks as Anarchia and East End battle it out in the standings.
Yeah, it's it's going to be so fun. Like, it was just such a blast with the friendly trash talk chirping going on. It's going to be great. For us, it's normal. For a guy like Mooch, who's chiming in saying he's going on vacation to the beach in Delaware next week. He'll be watching the UFWJ while he's there. Friends are going to be looking at me weird. You know what? But you just got to get him involved with the excitement. I mean, I think that's one of the coolest things is that, Mooch is getting so involved. And, I remember going to or wanting to go to Mexico over Christmas to be able to watch a World Junior game on the beach. I got to do it with an Oiler game once, but I think that's really cool to be able to watch a World Junior. Usually you're escaping the cold of Canada to do it. Now, you can just go to any beach in your local neighborhood and watch it. So sort of mission accomplished in that regard when it comes to the World Juniors. Watching it on a beach in December, yeah, you can understand that. August, maybe not so much. But anyway, let's take a look at what this roster looks like now, Larry.
Yeah, and Mooch has decided to jump on the Detroit Red Wings bandwagon.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he'll have a bit of a soft spot for Anarchia because 2 of their better players, Sebastian Cossa, if he gets into games for Canada, he's a top prospect for Detroit, as is Theodor Niederbach, who's going to be a top 6 forward for Team Sweden as well as for Anarchia. So they did bring back, 5 real quality forwards. They lost William Eklund, but I expect Matthew Nyes and Brett Berard to be real impact players for Team USA, as I expect Theodor Niederbach, and I really think Daniel Lungman is going to be a go-to guy for Sweden in this tournament. And we already talked about Samuel Helenius and how he had gelled with Brad Lambert, and they were Finland's best line at Christmas. So all in all, Aidan Hareshek is another player that got cut. They'll have a one last pick for Anarkia in supplementary draft 3.0. The redraft, again, because they had a number of their top picks come back, they took Jack Thompson, I believe, in the end of the second round, Anarkia did, but they didn't have many high picks. And I think it was interesting, Dean. They had, I want to say, 10 selections Anarkia did, and 8 of them were open market that no scout on UFFS had identified or registered yet. And I don't know if that speaks to the quality of the player or just that they were flying under the radar until maybe they'll have a coming out party at this Summer World Juniors. But Anarkia had by far the most open market players that are now property of the country Anarkia. So they get to keep them. Any profits that come to those players will go back to Anarkia. But overall, the supplementary draft, they didn't replace a guy like, as we mentioned, William Eklund, who is a Duckman's domination player. You don't replace him with Mats Algi from Switzerland. That was their top forward pick to replace William Eklund. That's not going to be a very good trade-off for Anarkia. Again, on defense, they kept their top 2. They lost Kirill Kirsanov, their number 3, and replaced them with Jack Thompson. That's probably a fairly decent trade-off. The big thing for Anarkia, Dean, above all else, is that even if they didn't have the best supplementary draft or the players weren't available, and Arnie came out and said it, I'm getting scooped. Every name I line up is going right before my pick, and I'm having to, react here because I know they were eyeing up Joshua Roy. And I mean, Joshua Roy versus Mats Algi, not to keep, knocking Mats Algi Swiss forward, but Joshua Roy would look pretty good on that roster replacing William Eklund. Mats Algi doesn't quite have the same impact. But the big thing for Anarkia is the returnees and the goaltending first and foremost. If they have Canada's goaltenders and that takes you into the gold medal game, you're looking like you're going to get some great points out of goaltending, and your top 2 on defense and your top 5 forwards are still solid. So I really think I look at the before and after for Anarkia. I had them as a B before. Going into that tournament, I thought they were in the medal contention, and I kept them at a B, Dean, but you probably could go B- if you wanted for their grade, because I do think, as mentioned, I talked myself into a B- now as we're talking, because again, William Eklund to Mats Algi, it was hard to replace a guy like William Eklund. You take William Eklund out, but then your next 4 or 5 forwards are all returning, and your goaltending's returning. That's why I think that the returning goaltending, to have Canada's goaltenders coming back, I think that was ultimately why I stuck with the B grade and still have Anarkia right there trying to contend with East End for a medal.
Mooch says Kosa is Red Army as well as Casper. Go Red Wings, LOL. And this is, this is my dream scenario for this tournament. First of all, we win gold, and we do it by Brett Brochu taking over the starting goaltending position for Canada and riding to a gold medal, while Anarkia's goaltenders don't get any points for them. Like that is the dream scenario for East End. Us to win gold and our Canadian goaltender playing instead of their goaltender. Like that would ultimately be salt in the wounds for Anarkia. Now, it could easily be flipped and they bump us out by doing that too. So, like I always say,
you be cocky and arrogant, even when you're getting beat.
You have to be cocky and arrogant in these kind of tournaments because it's such a short tournament. So anyway, I agree. I think that goaltending could easily carry them in this tournament. So you're not replacing William Eklund, as you said, but not having to replace that strong goaltending is such a bonus for them. So congratulations to Anarchy. I can't believe I just said that. I think I might have just thrown up in my mouth a little bit, but I'm not sure. Anyway, let's get on to the final country now. Yukon Republic, and this is their roster before things. And if people didn't notice, we've unveiled these in the order that the draft went. And the initial auction was based on what you spent in the franchise auction, the country auction, and that incorporated where you drafted. So we were the third highest bidder. We drafted third. Yukon drafted number 10.
Yeah, every round, right? The draft order stayed the same for every round. So UCann Republic had the last pick in every round of the inaugural draft. And going back to Anarchia, one last thought there, Dean, was they only had, and I know you mentioned it with East End as well. I think you picked at 2 and then not until the 20s.
Yeah, 28.
28. And there's a big window there of guys that were flying off. You could imagine with Arnie Entz and Brent Baldwin and Jason Melnick there with the Anarchia franchise. They only had 2 picks in the top 50, and one of them has since got cut. That was Aidan Hareshek. So they only had 1 pick in the top 50, and that was Jack Thompson. So they're not getting much from the supplementary draft as far as reinforcements go. So all their picks were later round picks. So
the smallest violin is playing for Arnie and Anarchia right now.
So yeah, the guys that got them there, the guys they got in that original draft in December, they didn't lose a whole lot of them other than obviously William Eklund. The guys they had in December are going to have to be the guys that continue to carry them to a medal because they're not getting much in the way of reinforcements. UCann Republic, Dean, this is a really interesting franchise because the first thing you're going to notice about the December roster, including, their first round pick, is they had the Russian goaltending tandem of Yaroslav Askarov, first round pick in the NHL, highly touted. He would have been right there with Jesper Wallstad as potential tournament MVP, top goaltender, and Yegor Guskov was his backup. They were 1-2, and they actually Guskov played ahead of Askarov at the previous year's World Juniors. So to lose that Russian goaltending tandem, they also took Marat Kuznetsov, who is going to be Russia's number 1 center likely. A really talented Minnesota Wild prospect. They took him in the 3rd round. And they also took Vladimir Grudinin, who very underrated puck-moving power play type defenseman from Russia. So out of all the countries, obviously Republic of the Seven Seas was impacted losing Mafi Mishkoff. But all in all, when Russia was ousted from this tournament, UCann Republic, that was a huge blow. And so their big strategy, Dean, the most interesting thing about UCann Republic, another country that passed on Thomas Bordelo for a prospect, Dean, that, I would say a couple months ago, the average hockey fan, even the average hardcore junior hockey fan, didn't know who Remington Koppel or Andrew Oakey were. Well, guess what? Now they might be number 1 and number 2. For one of them might be the Team USA starter at this year's World Juniors. Remington Koppel's another one of those guys that's went through 3 drafts, just like Hunter McCowan, undrafted, and is all of a sudden at the World Juniors and might be a starting goalie at the World Juniors. So again, I don't want to keep calling this tournament watered down, but what a change to have Yaroslav Askarov and Yegor Guskov from Russia. And now you have Remington Koppel, great name, by the way, Remington, that's an awesome first name. But Remington Koppel and Andrew Oak as your tandem, along with Kelly Klang, who might get a game if Jesper Wallstad gets a rest at some point in the tournament. Klang might be number 2 for Sweden, likely as number 2 for Sweden. But they really are going to rely now, Dean, on Koppel and Oakey. One of those guys have to beat out Caden Mabreko of Midgard. And Mabreko's the returnee, so he's the incumbent. He was on the roster in December. He's the only one returning. They got the 2 new guys, Remington Koppel and Andrew Oakey. A lot of people, I'm really interested and intrigued by this situation in USA goaltending, so I'm following it quite closely. A lot of people do think that Remington Koppel is going to emerge as a starting goaltender, but in their last pre-tournament game, Caden Mabreko pitched a shutout in his half of the game, 13 for 13 on saves. So do you go with the incumbent or do you go with the guy who maybe had a better season in the USHL in Remington Koppel? But to take both those American goaltenders with your 1st and 2nd round pick, for that tandem to sort of replace the Russian tandem with the American tandem. A very interesting strategy for UCann Republic because, again, they did pass on Thomas Bordelo among others. But when I look at the before and after and the grades, Dean, I had them as a B before because I thought picking last throughout the draft, they still came away with a really competitive roster that was in the mix for a medal. And now, again, just the uncertainty over that goaltending, the downgrade in goal from Russia to USA, although USA could come out and win gold and Koppel could be the breakout star of the tournament or Andrew Oakey, but the uncertainty has me going with a C here, but I still like their their overall, for drafting last in December, and you look at that depth chart even still with the returning forwards and defense, I think UCAN Republic might be the sleeper of the tournament if they can get that goaltending from their surprising American tandem they got there with Remington Koppel and Andrew Oke. But they're in the battle for bronze along with 5 or 6 or 7 other countries.
Well, it's interesting. You would think, oh, they're drafting 10th. That's great. They get 10 and 11. No, it's not a snake draft. It was based on how much you bid in the auction. So they drafted last every single round. I think a B is exceptional. And I applaud the strategy. You lose your one of the big parts of your team, you replace them with another country that should contend for a medal. We'll get into the predictions in a second, but that's all 10 rosters and the before, the after, the renovations, and then the grade from Mr. Fisher, our teacher. So I think you did a great job. I know that's never easy to maybe hand out a tougher grade, but it is what it is after the supplemental draft. So now we've talked about some of the guys that are here, some of the guys that aren't here. Let's do a little David Letterman here and a couple of top 10 lists. So from our home office in Omaha, we bring you the top 10 missing impact players for the World Juniors. And right off the bat, the number 1 pick from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Dean, the number 1 and 2, right? Power and Beniers, first and second overall last year in 2021 draft, are both missing in actions. And again, those are 2 guys that have played in the NHL now and had some success in the NHL. They jumped right in and they were, if it's sink or swim, they were both on the NHL. They didn't look out of place. So again, 2 guys that maybe have outgrown the World Juniors, but 2 guys that are elite at this age group. And if as far as best on best for the age class, you would have loved to see Power try to shut down Beniers' Canada-USA rivalry, but we don't get that. So we're missing the first and second overall pick from 2021. We're also missing the first overall pick from 2022 and the projected first overall pick from 2022, because we have to keep reminding everybody that Shane Wright's now a 4th overall pick. Right. He's not the first overall pick, or even it's not even a 1-2 situation, because that was the big shocker right up till the morning of the draft, till when Montreal stepped up to the mic. Everybody was still expecting Shane Wright. So what a shocker that was. But both Uri Slavkowski, the number 1 pick in this year's draft, and Shane Wright, who fell to 4th overall, are both missing the tournament. I really thought Shane Wright might be here to kind of have that revenge tour, and really light it up and make Montreal, that death glare he gave the Montreal table when he got to the stage to meet Ron Francis and the Seattle Kraken brass. I thought he'd be, trying to play at this tournament and have a big impact. But also, we talk about Owen Power being the top D. Jake Sanderson would have been right there in the conversation for top defenseman at this tournament. Another guy who's would have been a man among boys if he was playing here in the summer, going to probably be an impact player for the Ottawa Senators this upcoming season. And that trend continues, man among boys, guys that are already, pro hockey players. Cole Perfetti and Alexander Holtz would have been 2 of the potential goal scoring leaders, shots leaders in this tournament. Obviously both sniper type guys. William Eklund, again, a guy that was a top 10 pick that would have had a huge role for Sweden. Drew Comesso I put on the listing because he would have been the starting goaltender for Team USA. He was the consensus starter. Now that's the biggest question mark for Team USA now without Drew Comesso. Bit of a surprise he's not here. And then number 10, Dean, I just threw them all together. Team Russia, as far as missing impact players. Get first round picks. Mafi Mishkoff, the first overall pick in the UFWJ, as well as Yaroslav Askarov, who went 10th overall at the end of the first round to UCAN Republic. But 25 players are missing from Team Russia because Team Russia is not here. But starting with those 2, Mishkov and Askarov as huge missing impact players when you look at this top 10 list.
Yeah, I mean, listen, first of all, I think Shane Wright's going to do all his proving in the NHL. I think Shane Wright is saying I'm not letting an injury, disrupt my NHL career. And that's why he's not playing in this. He's probably saying, I'm going to play in Seattle. And but that list, I mean, geez, that's just, and I love the number 10, just entire Team Russia, because there's so many players that could have had an impact and did have an impact in the first 3 days. Now, having said that, we can look at a glass half full and say, instead of worrying about the guys that aren't there, how about the guys that are there? And number one on the list is the guy that we took with the second pick, so we're certainly happy. But when we look at that list of guys that are not there, yeah, there's some studs, obviously some first overall picks. It's not like this is second banana here. Like, these are still some pretty talented players that will get to shine, and some of them would have been in the tournament in December if it wasn't for COVID.
For sure, Dean. The top 10 new impact players, like you said, Atu Ratti and Thomas Bordelo, for me, were 1-2 on my draft board for that simple reason that they both would have been top 6, top line players in December if they didn't have COVID. So the fact they're here now in the summer, they sort of separated themselves from the pack in my mind as far as the top 2 talents, because they were the 2 that would have been there in December had they not had COVID. And then the 4 new forwards for Canada, and I mean, they probably have 7 or 8 new forwards, but the 4 that really stand out to me are Joshua Roy of Can West. Obviously, he's getting the top line bump right off the bat with McTavish and Bedard. He's going to be a potential catalyst there. And then 3 guys that are going to shoot the puck a lot in Tyson Forster, William Dufour, and Brennan Othman. I think they're all sort of volume shooters. Shots on goal is a category in UFWJ. So I think those 4 Canadian forwards are all going to be impact players, but it'll be interesting to see which of those 4. And I look at those countries, Dean, especially Can West, Elite Prospectia, Monstopia, as guys that are in contention for the battle for bronze. It might come down to which one of those 3 Canadian forwards steps up and has the biggest tournament. And then obviously we mentioned Liam Ongren, another Can West player. He was their first round pick. Again, a new impact player, and he's new because he's young. He's going to get at least 2, likely 3 UFWJ tournaments. William Wallander, I threw him on the list as we're all forwards up to that point, and I think William Wallander could have a decent impact. That's a deep blue line for Sweden, but he's a big guy. He's a 19-year-old or 20-year-old guy, so he's not young. He's got good size, good skating ability. I think he'll have a big impact for Sweden and for Midgard. The name of the tournament, again, I really like the name Remington Koppel. People are telling me he's going to be the starter for Team USA. If that's true, then UCAN Republic will certainly be pumped, and Midgard might be a bit disappointed if it's not Caden Mabreko. But if it's Remington Koppel, he's certainly going to be a new impact player. And then last but not least, Sean Behrens, Colorado Avalanche defense prospect out of the NCAA. A real puck-moving guy. It's kind of like a Samuel Girard maybe down the road. He's going to contribute some offense, but he's going to be an all-around quality defender for the Republic of the Seven Seas. But definitely 1-2. There's a tier there, in my opinion, as far as new impact players. And number 1 and number 2, Ratti and Bordelo, are the cream of the crop as far as the new guys go.
Yeah, and Wall being 100-point guy in that first line just makes that pick for Can West and with their goaltending that they talked about. I think that Can West is, going into this tournament. I look at them as a sleeper team that with that potential of those guys getting hot. When we looked at them before, you had them on the podium in December.
Yeah, Dean, I really thought that they had Elite Prospectia again with Wright and Power and McCamadulin. And, I really thought they were the team to beat, especially once Jakub Malik was the starting, or no, sorry, Jakub Malik was the scoreway. But Elite Prospectia, I thought, at the December tournament was potentially the team to beat. They weren't through 3 days. They were in that battle for bronze at the December tournament, but I thought their roster was built to win. I also really liked Can West, and I thought Velta Cunha, again, Connor Bedard being a younger guy, I didn't know what kind of impact he'd have as a 16-year-old playing against 19-year-olds, but obviously he's a special generational talent. So, but again, going back to December, that was the way I had it. I had Elite Prospectia, Can West, and Velta Cunha. And then, Dean, with the supplementary draft behind us and the new look rosters, again, Velta Cunha having Thomas Bordelo fall into their lap, and the fact they got back McTavish and Bedard, and they also had Luke Hughes back as their number 1 defenseman. I really think that Velta Cunha is now the team to beat. They're my favorites for gold, and to me it's 1A, 1B here. and then it's the battle for bronze. So I think whether it's Valtakunya or East End, I think they're going to be gold, silver. I would be surprised if either of those countries aren't on the podium. I would be fairly surprised if they're not 1-2. I think East End is the only country that's capable of taking a run at Valtakunya. I think, a Turati, Kent Johnson, depending, again, between those two countries, there's not much goaltending necessarily. So depending how the goaltending shakes out, East End's goaltenders could potentially close the gap on Valtakunya there. But I think, East End, Valtakunya, East End having their entire defense returning, I think, along with a lot of firepower up front, I really think those two countries have separated themselves from the pack in the fallout of the supplementary draft. I would be surprised, again, especially because they got, in my estimation, the top two talents available in the supplementary draft. Atu Ratty, 2nd overall to East End, and Thomas Bordelo, 7th overall, surprisingly, to Valtakunya, as somewhat of a gift to have him fall in their lap in the 2nd round. But to me, it's 1A, 1B, Valtakunya and East End. And then, Dean, the battle for bronze. And I think there could be a bit of separation between 2 and 3. But there's a number of countries, Elite Prospectia, Can West, Monstopia with Jesper Wallstad, Scoreway, who was off to such a strong start in December. There's a lot of countries that are in the mix, even Republic of the Seven Seas, UCAN Republic, go up and down the list. There's a lot of potential bronze medalists that could take a run at bronze, but ultimately I sided with Anarchia. And again, they're not getting much help from the supplementary draft, no real reinforcements there. But what Anarchia had was the Canadian goaltending tandem coming back, their top 2 defensemen in Faber and Cormier, and 5 of their top 6 forwards, losing William Eklund, big loss, but the next 4 or the next 5 are all returning and all looking like impact players for their respective countries at the World Junior Championship. So ultimately, I gave Arnie and the boys at Anarchia the bump for the battle for bronze goes to Anarchia, but I really think Valtakunya and East End are the class of this summer's tournament.
All right, I'm going to flip those, and I'm going to go eat. Well, how could I not? I can't not predict us to win. So East End is going to win gold. I'll say Valtakunya will claim silver. And I'm going with Can West to sneak into that number 3 spot. And as for Anarchia,
missed it by that much.
Sorry, maybe next year. But that's what I'm doing. I'm going with East End, Valtakunya, and Can West. But what about the actual tournament? It starts tomorrow, Larry. I mean, Mooch just said it on our chat group. 3 games tomorrow. And I think most days there's 3 games. It's going to be beautiful. I'm going to try to get down there. Obviously, Ian and I and Craig are going to try to hook up for a little face-to-face time and, chat about what we're going to do with our gold medals. But it's going to be so much fun. It starts tomorrow. What is your prediction? We've got a few minutes. I can't believe, this timed out perfectly. For one of the first shows for us being back, I don't know if we could have timed it out perfectly, but a few minutes left. What about the actual tournament? We're focused on the UFWJ. So many people that are hockey fans will be focused on the actual tournament. What do you like for gold, silver, bronze as far as the World Juniors?
The World Juniors, Dean, I look at it the same way we looked at the rankings and the grades for UFWJ. Who has the most impact players returning? It's Finland. Finland only lost a couple players off their December roster, and their best player they lost is nowhere near as good as the best player they got in Atu Ratty. So I think Finland is the team to beat at this year's World Junior Championship. I have Finland winning gold over Canada. Canada lost a lot of players, but we all know Canada could send 2 teams to the World Juniors every year and potentially medal with 2 teams. It's the deepest talent pool in the world for junior hockey with the CHL and obviously some NCAA talents like Kent Johnson. But I really think if any team's going to beat Canada, it's going to be Finland. I think Finland's got a great team on paper. I like Finland over Canada for gold. And then I like Sweden with, again, goaltending. Jesper Wallstad, by far, in my opinion, the goaltender of the tournament. I think Sweden is going to defeat the Americans, Team USA, for bronze. So I got Finland gold, Canada silver, and Sweden bronze.
Okay, so Larry is he's picking against Canada.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Why? Well, but you know what? Those are really good points, and I'm happy to hear them because we're loaded with Finns. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm flipping those countries because I really want Canada, Finland to play twice. East End needs Canada, Finland to have 2 big games. So I'll go Canada, Finland, and then I'll take the Americans to win bronze. So a little bit different, but it's going to be fun. I mean, the World Juniors in August, and then we get the UFHL starting up, and then we get another tournament right away. I know it sucked that we had to cancel the tournament, or the tournament was canceled in December. I'm just glad we have this, because as you and I talked about, we thought maybe this tournament was going to get canceled altogether. So it starts tomorrow, 3 games. Please, Larry, remind everybody that is watching or that will watch this, that is participating, what is the policy for lineups? Because I believe it was Jeff Ray or Mick saying they got dashed one day last in December, and it only lasted 3 days. So that really hurt them. But what is the policy for lineups? Give everybody one more reminder, and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, very important point there, Dean. The World Junior Championship, a little different than the NHL. They actually dress 13 forwards and 7D each game. So 1 extra dresses, but they have a 25-man roster. So the every day you announce who your bench players are, your reserves. That's for most countries, that's going to be 1 forward, 1 defenseman, and 2 goaltenders, because you have 3 goaltenders, only 1 starts every day. So you have 2 goalies on the bench every day, as well as 2 skaters. In most cases, it'll be a forward and a defenseman. In one case, there'll be 2 defensemen. In one country, we'll actually only have 1 skater on the bench. It'll be a defenseman, because Sweden threw us a curveball and only brought 13 forwards instead of 14, as mentioned. And the other thing, Dean, last but not least, supplementary draft 3.0. We're just waiting on 1 cut. Switzerland's got 9 defensemen. They got to cut 1D. And then we're going to do another draft tomorrow prior to the start of the games. They get going at 2 p.m. Eastern. So one last drafting. And for the people that are listening, there's 5 players available. And there's 1 player in my mind that only 1 shocking available player that I thought would have been drafted by this point. And I'm not going to say his name, but I will say that he's the captain of one of the countries and potentially their number 1 defenseman in ice time. He's still out there. So definitely you guys can do your homework, research those names. But it's going to be, again, you look at those 5 names, Dean, and 6 months ago, those names, most people wouldn't recognize any of the 5 names. And I couldn't give you much of a scouting report, but 5 players will be drafted tomorrow. The rosters will be rounded out, and the puck will drop at 2 p.m. Eastern. And that's going to be a fun game. Czechia against Slovakia, a longtime rivals. So can't wait for UFWJ to get going tomorrow. And the next 2 weeks are going to be a fun roller coaster ride for the 10 countries in the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors.
You betcha. We have a bunch of watch-alongs planned, so stay tuned. There's the website on the screen right there, uffsports.com. Obviously, the UFWJ, at the UFWJ for Twitter. You could follow all along, but we will have some watch-along parties here on Twitch that people can join in. And, this has been a lot of fun, kind of the unofficial start to the hockey season, I guess, as we're going to get UFHL now back on the air. Great stuff, as always, Larry. Thank you so much for joining me on this show. I know all the owners and the listeners absolutely love it. So great to get back on the air with you. Let's hope for a fun and entertaining hockey tournament in August. And it's just the beginning. Thanks again for joining us, Larry, and we will look forward to the watch-alongs during the tournament. Take care.